It was, in fact, a political decision by invisible actors who have not come forward. It was the product of precisely the sort of corrupt collusion I have identified and criticized. Now, I commend the panel for their integrity and thoroughness. The three members on it have behaved impeccably throughout. What we have seen is a perfect example of the underhand collusion that has existed for so long between immoderate defenders of Israeli extremism and figures at the top of the Conservative Party, both inside and outside Parliament. They've tried to threaten me, but I will not be bullied or silenced. When it comes to accusations of anti-Semitism, we're not equal under the law. Where the IHRA definition has been adopted as the benchmark for conduct, there is no equivalent benchmark for those who feel wrongly accused or who consider their attackers to be the real extremists. Where anti-Semitism genuinely exists, it should be ruthlessly called out. But it should not be artificially used to divert attention from legitimate comment on Israel. The attacks on me have been vexatious and unjustified, as the panel concluded clearly. Now, I consider myself free to repeat everything I said in my evidence to the party's complaints process, and I will consider publishing all of it. At its heart is the perverse, and I would argue corrupt, relationship money, improper influence, and the promotion of Israeli interests above our own have contributed to the destruction of the UK's independent foreign policy. They've also undermined UNRWA, the UN, Prime Minister's own record as a human rights lawyer will inspire him to be courageous and principled. The few months before the US election offer him a window of opportunity to reassert UK policy on adherence to international law. But if the Conservative Party is to recover, it cannot do so without admitting and addressing this poison in its midst. It must start by answering clearly some crucial questions about its conduct on the issue I'm addressing today. What happened in CCHQ? Who made the decision to shape and adopt this complaint? Who instructed a press officer to notify the media? What contact was there about this between CFI, the then party chairman, Oliver Dowden, or any others? Will the party now undertake to decouple itself Will the party perhaps at last come clean on who paid for Priti Patel's trip to Israel, after which she was sacked as Development Secretary? So will the press put each and every Conservative leadership contender on the spot about their adherence to international law and the illegality of settlements? Now, these are but a few of the many questions the press, I think, should be asking about this long-running scandal. So, in summary, we must all adhere to international law and uphold the activity of its institutions, its courts, and the people who work within them. In doing so, I will not be bullied or silenced, and I hope all decent journalists and public figures will assist in that endeavour. Thank you. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sir Alan, for that. So, yes, please raise your hand and I'll go one by one. I will go to LBC.
Oh, yes. It's not members of the Conservative Party like me who have, as it were, gone off track. It is some people at the top of the Conservative Party. And I think that judgment has clearly been made recently by the British electorate. I deliberately and will continue to remain a member of the Conservative Party. Otherwise, it would appear in the eyes of many to be an admission of defeat. I'm not going to be defeated on this. I'm not going to run away from the issue, and I'm not going to be bullied.
Thank you.
And by the way, my thanks to LBC for giving me the launch pad for this issue in my interview with Nick Ferrari.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just had a question about the feeling within the Foreign Office, because obviously, as you said, there's poison in the mix of the Conservative Party and effectively seems at the moment there isn't an independent British foreign policy in the Conservative in power because of the power of the empire. But obviously, there's a lot of people working in the Foreign Office. You were a minister yourself. Are people aware of this issue, and is there internal dissent against what this control is being exerted by foreign power on our own foreign policy?
My experience when in the Foreign Office is there is a lot of deep concern amongst officials and ambassadors about this undue influence. It is tempered, of course, by not wanting to be at odds with the United States, and the next few months will be critical in that judgment. And that's always been the problem, that we don't dare sort of express our view clearly for fear of being at odds with the US president. But I think that what is crucial is that we do have our policy, but even the policy we do have is not properly supported by many in our own government. And that is my point. And there are senior figures in the Conservative Party who essentially have gone behind the backs of due and proper government processes, behind the backs of the Foreign Office, to work directly into and through Number 10 in order to distort that policy and not properly apply it. That is the problem. And in my interview on LBC, I named those names. We've obviously had an election since, but now that that election is over, I would urge the best of British journalism to dig a bit deeper and ask the second layer questions. I would also ask journalists, when they're given a quote by those who claim to represent Jewish opinion, to ask them the second layer questions. Do you believe in the illegality of settlements? And if they refuse to answer or say no, then you know that you're dealing with someone who is not a moderate, decent, law-abiding person, and that should be held to account. So that is where I think there is a lot missing in journalism, and I'd urge now people to concentrate on this issue at greater depth and not just take people's words without further questioning.
Thank you. We'll go to the gentleman in the blue shirt now. I would also just like to ask good journalists for their name now.
Yes, I'm speaking to the national spoke before the election.
We did.
So therefore, a question on the election. You said there was open silence on Gaza, but of course there were a few pro-Gaza independents elected. Is that a welcome development in that it puts pressure on Labour to shift its position on that?
I think it was inevitable, because when you have the most burning issue in foreign policy still occurring, and you try and bury it during the election, there's going to be a reaction. And I think there was concern that the mentions of a possible Palestinian state on the hand by both parties were lukewarm. And in fact, on the Conservative Party, if you read the manifesto, there was almost nothing about foreign policy whatsoever. The words in the Labour manifesto were very much better. and some of the words we've heard from the new Prime Minister since are encouraging. I think events in the United States and what now appears to be the likely election of Donald Trump will make people more cautious again, which is complicating. But we should have the courage of our own convictions. We are a member of the P5 of the United Nations. We used to have the mandate 100 years ago, describe it as you wish, but that's an historical fact. And it leaves us with an obligation over 100 years after the Balfour Declaration to complete the second half of that promise. And I think that we have lost our confidence, our conviction, and our moral standing by being, I think, lukewarm at best, in denial at worst on this issue. So I hope that the new government and David Lamy's visit to Israel this week at least is a start, but without a Palestinian state, really, this is going to remain a very imbalanced argument. Back to LBC.
Sorry, can I just come back on this? You just sound a lot warmer on Labour's foreign policy than you do on the Conservatives. I wonder whether you consider defecting to Labour if this looks as though you're very strongly about.
No, I will not defect to Labour. I will make my stand within the Conservative Party. Thank you for that kind offer. I have been a member of the Conservative Party for 50 years. I joined the Labour Party. But as all Conservatives should, I believe in international law and the principles behind that international law. And I also am very familiar with the politics of the Middle East. And I think that our reputation amongst people who are natural friends there has, over the last few years, absolutely plummeted. And it needs to be revived and retrieved. People look to the UK as a source of decency, leadership, conviction, and intellectual and moral integrity. And over the last few years, all of those qualities have been seriously lacking.
Yeah, hi, Simon Hitler, I've got two questions.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. You seem quite optimistic about prospects for Labour administration. You talked about rays of hope, and you talked about the Foreign Secretary's visit to Israel. I just wondered if you could comment on the optics of this photo with Prime Minister Netanyahu, given the serious allegations that he faces charges in the war crimes at the ICC.
Well, having a photograph of Netanyahu never offers good optics, but it can be politically necessary. So I think one has to accept the realities of political visits, and indeed all diplomacy. That diplomacy with people you like and agree with is easy. Diplomacy is all the more necessary when you're dealing with people you find difficult. The next question.
Thank you. The second question concerns your case. I just wondered, in terms of the questions that you raised about what you discovered from the judging yourself about the fact that there was no formal complaint, and that you can't now get to the bottom of who initiated the complaint. Are you planning any further action yourself to get to the bottom of those issues?
I'm contemplating further action, but my first stage in this is to urge you as responsible journalists to do what you can to flush out the truth. I think that what happened was an attempt to silence, certainly during the general election campaign, but also far beyond that. But they have not succeeded in discrediting me. Quite the opposite. They've shown that what I have been saying is right. And the issue of the top of the party siding with extremist rather than moderate Israeli policy has been going on for many, many years. And the people who've been doing that, and the flow of money and the influence behind the scenes that attaches to it, need to be exposed. And an important part of this process is to home in on what will soon be a leadership election in the Conservative Party, where some of the contenders are at the very, very extreme end of the spectrum on this issue and need to be exposed very, very clearly and need to be made to commit to international law and a belief in the illegality of settlements.
Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Can I just clarify, are you accusing CFI of having anything to do with your investigation? And secondly, can I get you to clarify your comments just now about Tory leadership? Who are you worried about?
I think it's inevitable that CFI did their utmost to persuade the party to put me into a complaints procedure. After all, there was press comment from Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and the CFI. And in particular CFI, because obviously I had named Lord Pollack and Lord Pickles. In terms of the potential leadership contenders, I think Suella Braverman is just off the scale on this, and describing all the marches in defense of Palestinian justice as hate marches was contemptible. I think she has disqualified herself from any serious candidacy. Robert Jenrick is a bit better, but not much. Priti Patel has form on this, as I mentioned earlier, and again, questions need to be asked, even though it was about an incident some years ago. But I suspect she won't stand. So I think the lineup is looking very, very questionable. And those are the two who I would name as being any more for any more. Matt Kennard, ladies first, maybe.
You had the local arches there. So you've been exonerated, but
Yes.
you still don't know who was behind it. How worrying is that for you and for people like yourself in the Conservative Party, as well as in the other parties like the kind of damage that's causing to the reputation of the party and of the United Kingdom?
Where anti-Semitism definitely exists, it should be rooted out. I feel that very, very strongly. It's unacceptable in any form. But where there is not anti-Semitism, the accusation of such should not be used to try and stop legitimate comment on Israel. And we all know there is a difficulty of the conflation between domestic Jewish opinion, or what people claim to be Jewish opinion, and the conduct and defense of Israel. The two, in large part, are separate and should remain so. And so what I sometimes call abuse Semitism is where an unjustified accusation of anti-Semitism is used to bully or silence is not acceptable. So there are some equal and opposite forces in play here. I think in terms of the Conservative Party, this has gone on for too long. There has been a collusion at the very top, born of money, donor money, and everything I've described both in my book and in my comments today. And this improper relationship should be dismantled.
I've got two questions. So firstly, on the anti-Semitism issue, obviously you've been exonerated now, but as you said, some damage will have been done to your reputation. How dangerous do you think it is that this weaponization of anti-Semitism? Because obviously we all want to root out real anti-Semitism wherever it is, but accusing defenders of Palestinians of anti-Semitism seems to me to actually make fighting real anti-Semitism much harder because it muddies the water. That's the first question. Second question is the role of the media, which you hinted at. Why do you think the media doesn't cover Israeli influence in the way, say, they cover Russian influence, which everyone knows about, and that the general population is very aware of Russian and change for really this issue to get the oxygen it needs to something to change?
On your first question, I think that unjustified accusations of anti-Semitism used for other purposes is very damaging to the Jewish community. And I find that upsetting, and I think it is really very worrying. It's not in their interest. And I think that some of those who claim to be the voice of the Jewish community are particularly extreme and do not represent the Jewish community, where I think we should be supporting moderate Israelis and moderate Palestinians, and those who are the vast majority in this country who go about their daily business as Jewish people, not feeling the same sort of aggressive sentiments as those who keep on releasing aggressive press releases. Your second point was on the media. I think, I don't know how to put this, some of them get bullied or cowed or just abused on social media. There might just be one person in the workplace who takes offense and accuses them of anti-Semitism. There's a very difficult climate for a lot of people in companies, in media institutions, and just going about their daily life, who say, I don't dare touch that issue because someone's going to have a go at me. And that is not a good thing. If it's a matter of justice, and it's behind me, we're talking about international justice, in this case for Palestinians, then we should not be bullied into silence. Otherwise, we're letting down those who at the moment are being smashed to bits in Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah.
My name is Wayne Anderson. I'm also from Israel. I want to ask, do you think you're in a minority within the Conservative Party? Spoke about Palestinian justice and Israeli or laws or what have you who are of a similar opinion to you?
I'm in a minority because most people don't dare because they'd rather have an easy life. But most people don't know.